My standard for my comprehensive lesson plan is compare and contrast two or more characters, settings, or events in a story or drama, drawing on specific details in the text. Thank you. Katie, can you give me some similarities between these two objects?
They're both bugs, they both can fly, and they both have legs.
Good job. Can you give me some differences between these two bugs?
They're different colored. One is big and one is small. One has a stinger when the other sucks blood.
So, when you were looking for similarities and differences between these two bugs, what did you look at? What types of things did you look at?
They're physical.
Their physical being. But you also talked about how the mosquito sucks blood.
Oh, and my knowledge of knowing about them.
Very smart. I appreciate that. So for your assignment, we're going to be doing a compare and contrast activity between the characters or settings or events in the story The Outsiders. So when we're reading through our book, we have to think about what can we use as examples of similarities and differences. So you said that we can use physical traits, we can use prior knowledge, but we can also use what we know about their mental state, their feelings, how they interact with each other, the things that they like to do. So when you're reading through the book, make sure you're taking note of that after you decide whether or not you're going to do your characters or settings or events in your compare and contrast activity. Thank you. You can go.
Oh girl, I thought I had to do it.
No. You didn't read the book.
Are you gonna cut that out?
No, I'm turning all of this in. So us talking right now is gonna be in my grade. After I do the delivery of content for my guided practice, I was just gonna read a book and then have them think about, I would prompt them to look at the characters and the events in the story and think in their mind about similarities and differences that they noticed throughout the book. And then for their independent practice, to get them used to doing it so that they can do it for when we read The Outsiders, I'll have them use the excerpt that they used for their vocabulary workshop, and they can choose whatever they want, whether they want to do characters, settings, or events, and compare and contrast them. The format is supposed to be an essay. They're going to have 5 examples of similarities and 5 examples of differences between whichever thing they choose to compare. And for their reflection, they will just share with the class. So for example, if I had a group that compared characters, they would just tell us what their 5 traits for similarities were, or what their 5 traits for differences were between the characters, and then so on and so forth between all the groups until I'm done with them. The book that I read was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. It takes place in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the 1960s. It's written as a personal narrative by the character Ponyboy. It involves 2 gangs, one on the east side called the Greasers, which is Ponyboy, his friends, Dally, Johnny, Steve, 2-Bit, and then his brothers. And then there is another gang called the Sox, short for Socials, and they live on the west side, the wealthier side of town. The book kind of details a traumatic sequence of events that's endured by Ponyboy, and it starts when Ponyboy goes to a movie by himself. On his walk home, he's jumped by some Sox that threaten to kill him, and lucky for him, some greasers come through and they save him. But the next day, Ponyboy decides to go to another movie with his friends Johnny and Dally. When they get there, they end up hanging out with some sock girls. They have fun, they watch the movie. Eventually, their friend 2-Bit comes to join them. The boys walk the girls back to 2-Bit's house so that he can give them a ride home. But on their journey, the girls' boyfriends see them, meet them, and they take the girls home. Ponyboy, at this time, is getting home late. He goes home, and his brother, Derry, is angry at him for getting home so late. So he slaps him right across the face, which makes Ponyboy run. And he leaves. He goes and meets up with his friend Johnny, and they go hang out at the baseball field. Unfortunately, the Sox find them there. They submerge Ponyboy's head completely underwater, and he blacks out. When Johnny sees this, he doesn't know what to do, and he knows he needs to protect Ponyboy, so he stabs one of the sock boys. He stabbed Bob. Bob dies. When Ponyboy regains consciousness, he's laying next to Bob's dead body and Johnny. Johnny and Ponyboy are scared, so they go to their friend Dally, and Dally takes them to an abandoned church, and they stay there for a few days, and they read out loud The Call of the Wild, which was pretty surprising. Dally comes to get them, and on their way home, they see that the church that they were staying in is on fire, and that there are a bunch of school children in there. So all three boys rush into the church. Dally gets hurt. Ponyboy passes out, and Johnny ends up in critical condition because the roof falls on his back and breaks it. The next day, Ponyboy is released. Dally and Johnny have to stay. Ponyboy and 2-Bit decide to go down to the store to get some soda. When they're on the way back to the hospital, they run into a greaser, and he tells them that he's tired of being a greaser, he's tired of the violence, he doesn't want to be involved in it anymore, and that he wasn't going to attend the rumble that was planned for later that night. Ponyboy and Dally go back to the hospital to see Ponyboy and 2-Bit go back to the hospital to see Johnny and Dally. Later that night, Ponyboy and 2-Bit go to the rumble. Dally gets out of the hospital, makes it just in time to be in the fight. The boys go back to the hospital to see Johnny, realize that he's dying, and they wait with him until he does pass. Once he passes, Dally kind of goes into a delirious type rage and leaves. Ponyboy goes into a haze and is just really upset. He gets home, he tells the other greasers about what happened to Johnny, and then he gets a call from Dally. Dally says, I robbed I robbed a store, and the cops are after me. By the time the greasers got down to the store, they were too late. Dally had raised his gun to the cops, and the cops had shot him. After that, Ponyboy was very, depressed because of the deaths of Johnny and Dally, and he allowed that to affect his grades and him mentally, and he became very irritable, and he got into lots of fights with his brother at home. Eventually, he has a talk with his oldest brother, and his oldest brother tells him that he needs to get it together, he needs to stop fighting, it's creating a horrible tension in the home, and it's unnecessary. And they all agree to stop fighting, and Ponyboy kind of has this revelation about how important family is and your family values, and he starts to heal from the deaths of Johnny and Dally and decides to write their stories, which ends up being the premise for the book, The Outsiders.